You're listening to A Quality Podcast with your hosts, John Thacker Jr. and Jake Harrell.
I have a client that has gone on a lean journey of 25 plus years, and they've evolved, and they have really evolved well. And I was asked recently what my favorite term for lean people is. And they call their guys, and I use guys in the generic sense of 2 of the 7 are women, it's lean champion. Their job is to champion lean within the corporation.
And welcome everybody to A Quality Podcast, the last episode of season 3. And we are thrilled to have with us today Bob Rush. Bob is a CI engineer at Gibson Custom Shop, which is pretty awesome. Hope we get to talk about that a little bit. Bob also has an extensive career, including Vice President of Operations with Lin Engineering. He was an associate lean manager with Tesla, and has been a management consultant for half a decade. Bob, you bring a lot to the table and the conversation. We're thrilled to have you on today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I look forward to it. I hope to have a few laughs, maybe share a little knowledge.
Well, I'm sure we'll laugh as long as Jake is on board. So great. Glad you could come on today. We wanted to talk about, we were throwing some ideas back and forth, and we were talking about what lean looks like in different industries, which I think is a pretty cool and useful topic because there's some, diffusion around the word lean these days, where it's used so much in so many contexts that it's losing its meaning a little bit. Is that fair?
That's absolutely correct. It has lost its meaning, partly because it is used as a generic term rather than to specify a specific function or activity. So now I'm a lean guy means, I think about it, so therefore I am. So
yeah. I wish it was that easy.
Yeah,
I'm an expert. Let me tell you how many nights I've stayed up thinking about. So I was listening to Dr. M's podcast recently, and I forget the guest he had on, which I apologize for. But he was making the distinction, before getting into his conversation, he was making a distinction between lean production, which is, the application of basically TPS principles to producing goods. He was distinguishing between that and enterprise lean, which I think is, a really valuable distinction to make, because if you're in a factory, and I get it, I've worked with a lot of production people, ops people, engineers, and they don't necessarily have a business background, but in the C-suite, your production environment, the whole thing is a cost center, right? Which is why the transition, in language to like value creation around lean doesn't make sense, right? From an enterprise standpoint, production doesn't create value. It realizes the promise of value, but they're not making decisions to add value to the product, right? They're kind of just executing the plan. So some clarity around, when we're talking about lean and what lean looks like in different industries, I guess we kind of need to start out by saying we're not necessarily talking about enterprise lean so much as production lean. Fair?
Yeah, some of it will be enterprise lean because there's some industries that have no production. One of my clients was in financial services. There's no
some of the application, I guess, of theory. It gets a little weird. I hear people arguing about the silliest things. I mean, it seems silly to me. I'm not.
You're talking about my LinkedIn where we argue about stuff. It's definitely mine.
Largely Jake is always involved. But there is like some, probably less fruitful. I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but conversations about how do you define value-added activity when you're originating bank mortgages. Well, how about if you stop worrying about that and just start worrying about what do I want more of and what do I want less of? Right.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get hung up on eliminating waste and they don't focus on adding value, right? I mean, because really you're trying to enhance value for whatever customer you have, whether it's the next assembly station or it's a bank that you're doing back office work for. It doesn't matter. They're just, what's the value? So yeah, we'll go eliminate waste, but you're really worried about the adding the value. And I think a lot of people forget about that.
Well, I probably have a slightly different perspective. I see the value as like, I don't know, the banana, and the waste is the banana peel. And in most cases in operations, I have the capability, resources, and authority to peel the banana. What I don't have is the capability, resources, or authority to create the banana or turn it into an orange or something like that, right? So sometimes if I'm looking at like different, call it cells, I'm just going to use that generically, but operating areas of a business, of a value stream. I just look at what's the banana to this guy. Everything else is the peel. I can take that off. And typically I don't need permission. I don't need a CapEx or something like that. That's something that I can do, kind of right now.
Did you just make the analogy that all of production people are monkeys?
Jake, I did not even.
Damn you for that comment, John. I work in production.
Why are you associating? Never mind. Monkeys don't even eat bananas. That's like.
Oh, and on the next episode of Mythbusters, do monkeys really eat bananas?
Only South American monkeys? I mean, I don't know. I guess like Malaysia has monkeys and bananas.
Yeah. Now,
we'll have to do an episode on that.
I understand your point, but I have people so focused on waste that they forget the value. What does your customer want? They're not linked to their customer, if you know what I mean. You talk about customers, and I'm lecturing my new guys about it. You have internal and external customers. Yeah, the external ones could be some cool musician, or it could be, some huge guitar center type store or something like that. But you have internal customers, and what do they want? What do they need? And when do they want it? And, their eyes are getting hurt wide open all of a sudden to realize that that's the case. And that's the value part. Understand the value, delivering to the next station. So,
yeah, I currently run a factory. We manufacture tempered shower enclosures, so glass showers. And I think I don't know if pitfall might be too strong of a word, but challenge for like an individual group. So you'll have one group that takes blanks that have raw edges, so sharp edges where the glass has been separated, and they polish the edges, and there's machines that do that, right? If they're focused on just waste elimination, right, then their goal is essentially to get those pieces done as quickly as possible with a certain acceptable quality level, right? The problem is, unless we as management go through and make that acceptable quality level, align that with the next station or stations, because the job shop, then you're kind of missing the pitch there.
Absolutely.
Next group, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I'm going through now, is to get them to talk to each other in terms of acceptable versus unacceptable. And most production shops, it's all about volume. It's how many did you produce, and very rarely does how many did you net become the first number that should be it. And that's wrong in our world. At least it should be that we should be worried about that net number. And how do I get that to be a 1-for-1 ratio, right? Everyone I touch passes. How do I do that? So
what are some quick wins in that guitar world? What are some, the audience a little bit about some nitty gritty
about the guitar world? In my vast 2 weeks of experience, and a sea of people that have been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years, building guitars for, names that everybody knows and worships, like Slash or
Eric Clapton.
Yeah, Clapton's more a Fender guy.
That was a joke for people that know music. That was an inside joke.
Yeah, although he did start out a Les Paul guy, but when he started running around with Jimi Hendrix, he switched to a Strat, and he's more closely associated with it now. Although he does have SGs that he trots out in concert now. So it's a different world. I've told the guys where I'm at now. Every factory is the same and every factory is different. My job is to show you how they're the same, and your job is to educate me on how they're different. So you go through it and you figure it out. There's flow, right? Everything is flow. So it's wood, which is new to me, because the last factory I spent a tremendous amount of time in, it was Tesla, which was a little different factory than the one I'm in now. That's for sure. It's an interesting world, and it's one of artisanship as opposed to, you just go to this machine and it's going to cut it perfectly for you every time. Wood, there are variations within the wood. So when you're working on, say, like a body, you want the people to be aware of that. The wood itself is, just the most obvious example is a knot will cause great aggravation, and that goes away. But another one that's really cool is the grain of the wood. So if you look at guitars, and you will see people talk about, 59 gold top. Well, the gold top is painted gold because the wood doesn't have much grain in it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you'll hear about a flame, a sunburst flame, and that's where it's heavily grained. They butterfly the block of wood for the body to come up with a laminate so they can match match it together to get that flame appearance, and then certain colors draw it out, which is why you see a lot of the reddish burst guitar, because the red draws the grain out. So everywhere you go, there are guitars in various stage, and if you walk the flow, it's incredible that it comes in a block of wood that they machine down to make a neck piece, and a body comes in, and they actually the laminated ones, they press the laminate on top, and it's just a block that's like, oh boy, 2 foot by 2 foot by maybe 4 or 5 inches. They glue it, they press it, and then they start machining it, and they cut the, for example, Les Paul shape out, and that's how it goes through the process. So binding,
Tobacco Sunburst.
Yes,
Tobacco Sunburst Les Paul is my dream guitar.
Is it really?
It's a little pricey for me. I'm not good enough to buy a good guitar, so
yeah. Well, there's one on our wall in our conference room. They're just everywhere. So watching them, the most artisanship process that they have is binding. So, and binding is the plastic that's around the edge of the guitar, and the higher quality guitar is, the more binding there is. So most guitars are just binding on the top of the body, but the really good ones get binding on the body, on the neck, and on the bottom. And it's, they actually tie, they call it rope, but it's like a cloth type thing that's like 50 feet long. And they bind it, and then they tie it to set the glue, and they have to tie it in such a way. And it has, talk about standard work. It literally tells them that you have to, a 1/4 of an inch from the horn, this has to be turn number 3, and things like that. And it's just, and you watch these guys go to it. And then when it comes off, it's beautiful, right? And this is before they're finished. This is still raw wood, but the binding goes on. And then you get signature models. So artists will allow their name to be used. And they come up with binding that's incredible, black and white check binding or roses or something like that. It's just, the whole process is fascinating to me. Now, this is a guy that spent from semiconductors, I ran a wafer fab for a while, to Tesla, and everything in between, to go into a guitar shop. You're like, oh man, this is a totally different world. This is just different. Finishing it's much like paint shop at Tesla. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. You paint it, lacquer, cure it. So, and then it goes in and gets buffed. So it gets that pretty sheen when it goes to the dealer or to the artist, it goes through to final assembly, and final assembly here is really where it becomes a guitar. Up till now, it's just a guitar body. But in final assembly, they put strings on, they put stop bars on, they put pickups in. Pickups are actually wired by Gibson. Every pickup is a Gibson, unless you order a Seymour Duncan or something like that. But we have a shop that makes our pickups for us. At Custom Shop, because we're in the ultra high end, we are the ultimate Gibson. We actually have an assembly line that picks the best of the pickups for us. They rework the ones they can to get them up to our standards. Otherwise, they go back to Gibson USA, and it goes into the Epiphones and things like that. But it's an incredible process.
So that's really cool. It sounds like to me, where you're working now is much more highly customized. Now, there's a little bit of a misconception out there that I've heard from people that are not in automotive. And that misconception is that cars and automobile production is not very custom. It's the same thing. And
as custom as my lipstick.
Yeah.
But everyone who's been in auto production knows that that's complete hogwash, and it's a miracle that Toyota can produce a Highlander and then a Corolla off of the same damn production line 57 seconds apart, and with custom color and everything, matched up to that serial. Setting that out of the way, right? So a lot of that production manufacturing is far more customized than inexperienced people think it is. Lean will never work in my industry. We're too customized.
Hence my discussion.
Right. But you bring up a couple of really interesting points that I think maybe sets apart what you're doing now as we talk about like lean in different industries. One is the natural substrate. Wood is different, and kind of your inventory self-determines a little bit what it can be used for, depending on the placement of knots and the grain structure and all of that. And I'm sure you have graded. Graded and sorted, right? And then you have artists that are using machines and tools to, craft different bits of the guitar out of this natural substrate. And then you have the custom finishes that, finish out the work or whatever. And so at every level, you have some sorting and grading. You have a very high skill level where, maybe the guy that is applying the fabric, like you were talking about earlier, maybe you can't just hire somebody off the street to do that. Right.
Okay.
So talk to me a little bit about the reduction of risk, right? How do you assess how risky things are to basically affect or shut down production? In my plant, my factory that I run, I can hire somebody tomorrow and it's about 2 weeks before they're really contributing. I imagine some of the roles that you're working with, that's not the case.
Yes. Well, I will tell you that it, depending on the role, there's some that you can come in a week. You can be doing it at our rate that we want every day. And there's other
some of the CI roles.
Yeah. Well, the CI role hit the daily rate day one. That was part of the agreement. So there was no training. So and there's other jobs that take 3 to 6 months to really get them to the finesse point. So that's part of what I'm working on first, is to figure those out, and how can we speed that up and not impact quality, because again, this is the custom shop. This is not, $100, you order it on Amazon guitar and the strings aren't right and the intonation's wrong. And a lot of them go to famous people or people that are famous enough to have money. And so I am at least cognizant of that. So we're doing it. We're trying to attack it 3 ways. One is I'm working with the the people that have been there the longest to talk about when you did that job, what were the secrets to that job?
Mm-hmm.
And now I have them actually doing a semi-modified stand and circle exercise in the areas they used to work in, and give me a list of your observations of it. So, and one area that we're actually having our first official Kaizen in starting next week, some of the guys that are in the buffing area came from that area. They moved upstream, and they have come up with lists of things for me of what the differences are between when they were there and what's going on now, and what they think we should improve. So yeah, you're working with them, and the best part of my job, and I think of Lean, is the talking to the people, because I talk to everybody. I talked to the CEO on Wednesday, and I talked to a guy that started on Tuesday. He went to orientation on Monday, was in our factory Tuesday, and I talked to him. So you're going to talk to a range of people and find people are fascinating. I mean, the one thing I know for a fact is very few people in life wake up in the morning hoping or wishing that they make a mistake. I think everybody comes in hoping, wishing that they don't make a mistake.
Maybe everybody but Mark Graben, right?
Well, Mark is realistic in that he knows that mistakes are going to happen. So yeah.
No, I really
having me on his
that,
podcast was one.
Well, he won't invite me on his podcast because I've never made a mistake.
Okay.
And if you believe that, I got a fridge to sell you, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I really appreciate you sharing that. I pulled a couple of things out there, right? One was you have people in the shop that used to do other jobs, and you're tapping into that knowledge and experience, right? That is really cool. I think that's something that, a lot of folks can learn from. Like, talk to and listen to your people. I had an experience that was similar. And the people that had used to do this job over here were largely discounted because the business had evolved so much since they used to do this job, right? And I just made it a point to say, hey, how did you used to do this? And get them to show me and talk to them. And what we found out was, yes, they did it differently, right? The work had evolved since then, but some of the problems were the same. And they had some really cool, clever ways of getting around those problems that everyone could implement right now. And yes, it didn't eliminate the root cause. It wasn't fancy, but it did allow the team to get more of what they want and less of what they don't want for the least possible effort, right?
Yep. So I always tell people it costs nothing to talk, because you never know when your next problem or solution is going to walk up to you.
Right.
So, my sensei taught me that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Right.
And he has his interpreter still remind me on a constant basis. So I'm sure I'll get a note about this when he sees it. So,
well, that's good. And you know what? It's kind of cool that, you're still in contact. That kind of relationship is so valuable.
Yeah. Well, the people in the States, when they hear sensei, they have one idea, but in Japan, sensei means a totally different thing. And, in the States, we talk about it meaning teacher, but it actually is very much an honor, to be called sensei by somebody. It goes along with how far down do you bow with that person. But what I learned with my sensei was, if it's truly a sensei relationship, it becomes more than just teaching. It becomes a partnership and a journey. And he taught me that regardless of the amount of experience you have, you're still learning. And that guy that you think you're teaching, it might be teaching you something if you're not listening. So,
there's a level of trust
Sensei
there
for the past 5 years. I completely agree with that.
I don't know if I do.
You know what we do need to do, John? We need to go the entire episode without ever mentioning why I have different makeup every time I'm on camera. Just never address it.
Just leave it as is.
you have to watch the episode. Yeah, let's discuss it at the very end. Then people have to watch the whole episode. You know?
then have a giveaway of some kind for the person that gets
It's a color-coded matrix. We're expecting 5 words. You get a gift card or something.
If you can list the number of changes in makeup Jake had during this show, we'll give you a free giveaway. Yeah, well, so we were talking earlier, kind of before the cameras were rolling, about some of the challenges out there in what we do, and of course, our last episode here on a quality podcast was a little tongue-in-cheek poking fun at all of the hogwash we have to fight through on the internet, sort of all the time. I haven't come across it too much in my career, but I have come across it quite a bit trying to consult, freelance consult. Mm-hmm. And that is like a poisoning of the well, mm-hmm. right? Where unskilled and inexperienced people basically foul it up for everybody else.
Yep.
Talk to me about that.
I made a good career out of following up those guys. There was one in particular I followed to 4 companies, and he shifted careers, and my consulting business died. I had to go back to work. So there's a lot of people out there. So I tell people, everybody wants to hire consultants as a fix. There are good consultants out there. There are a lot of good consultants out there that I've run across. Don't be afraid to ask in-depth questions about their pedigree. Who, what, when, why, where, right?
Yeah.
So I was trained by Shingujitsu. Well, that's okay. That's pretty easy to track down. What do they stand for? Who have they trained? What do they do? If he uses their style, what are the kind of results they get? That kind of thing. If you see them coming from one of the big consulting firms and their lean experience is in the big consulting firm, in all likelihood, they're not going to be good at it. They've not seen it. They've not lived it. So I tell people, look for experience, somebody that's been there, done that. And by been there, done that, I mean lived it, like not just as a consultant, but was in production or was in whatever you're trying to fix. If it's financial services, he was in that industry, did that work. Now he's doing this because he's got to understand it, right? I mean, we talked about flow. Yep. You got to understand the flow. And yes, I mean, I just did a huge value stream map and showed people that. But you really got to understand the flow. So the only way I was able to accomplish that was to take one of the production supervisors that's been there 7 years and started on the floor and worked his way up and did every job. And he was able to show me the bottlenecks and So those are the things I ask for. I look for. I also look for cultural fit. So just one example is at Gibson, even the CEO wears jeans and a t-shirt. Nowadays, it's always a Gibson shirt.
Sign me up, man. Like, that sounds awesome.
It's like it's just jeans and t-shirts. And when I told him that was one of the things that attracted me, he had like this, how cool is that? I mean, he was all excited. And our CEO, I really like him. His name is James Curley, JC. He came from Levi's. He was the guy that helped turn around Levi's.
That's why he's wearing jeans.
Yeah.
It has stock in it.
No, I'm familiar with the name from I think it was an Economist article about the turnaround over there. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And he brought part of his team there. So that's the leadership team at Gibson. Gibson Brands is the parent. And that's the attitude they brought with them, right? And I mean, he's energetic. He's happy that people are joining the company. He was brought in because of the bankruptcy. So he came in a dark moment and started doing really cool things. I mean, just recently, he did $1 an hour increase for everybody.
Jake, you got to say something so that the audience knows why we're laughing.
No, I'm just going to leave it as it is. You're not going to get any direction from me.
Oh, Jesus.
So anyway, JC just wants to fix things, but he gave $1 an hour adjustment to all the hourly people because of the price of gas.
Oh, that's
and he
cool.
says, he says, look, I think he said his wife's car, I put it in her SUV, and I thought, holy mackerel, how much? How could my people on the floor afford this? Oh my. So he did it. He did $1 an hour. And I thought, I thought that was really cool. I really did. This is a guy that gets people, that understands them. Now I can work with it, right? And I tell the story. I did interview at Gibson when I first moved here to Tennessee. They were looking for a lean guy, and I interviewed with the past management team. And I went away saying I never worked there ever under any circumstances. And that company is going to go bankrupt. And it took them 2 years after I said that to do it. So you could just see it. It was a horrible place, bad juju there. Just, you knew somebody was sacrificing chickens in the back room trying to get guitars out. Man.
What a suspiciously specific comment.
You can't touch this.
I'm going to steal that, though. Yeah. Our production plan is sacrifice another chicken.
Well, see, but there's levels. You have to go through levels, right? You start with KFC. Yeah. You sacrifice KFC first, and then you do a frozen chicken. And finally, when all else fails, it's a live chicken. I'm sorry, guys.
Not Gertrude. No.
Not Gertrude. So, and then it's funny because I really wasn't interested, but the guy that's my boss is a guitar industry veteran, famous, well-known, helped lead the Fender turnaround, helped lead lean at Fender in the early 2000s. They were famous for what they had done and taken this artisan industry and done these incredible things. I even toured their factory and thought they're doing some really cool stuff. So when I found out he would be my boss, I thought, well, I'll check it out. It was really quick how I joined. It was Tuesday after Memorial Day. The headhunter called me, and the following Friday I got a job offer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, that says something, right?
Yeah.
That is one of the things, like when I look for culture fit, one of the things that I assess is their talent acquisition process. Right. The companies that I've worked for where the need is apparent and it takes, 2 months to make a decision, that tells me something about the company. At the very least, it tells me that they are committed to ossified processes. Right. But more frequently than not, it tells me they don't know like what they really want. They just don't know. Somebody's on vacation. There's nobody to pick up the ball. The process doesn't move forward, right? Sloppy, all of that.
Yep.
And in today's market with, how tight the labor source is, come on, man.
That is how aliens had a significant impact on the 2020 election.
Okay.
So Bob, you were talking about joining Gibson.
Yeah.
And how quick the process was. Go ahead. Please continue.
Okay, so I talked to the guy that's my boss by Zoom with the HR person, and I thought, oh, he's pretty cool. It's kind of like what I thought, and I'll hear from him in a week or two. So, and then that night I got a call from the headhunter saying, how did it go? And I said, I think it went okay. I'm not sure that I aced it. And I always say that because I always think I could do better. And she says, well, apparently you did better than you thought because they would like to set up an on-site interview with you. I said, okay. And she said, list out some times. And I was actually in the middle of a Kaizen with a client where we were testing it out on second shift. The Kaizen was the second shift. My client sees this, he's going to laugh. He's like, I don't know. For some reason, the changes on first shift really work good. And then second shift, they're not so good. Well, I can tell you why. So I spent 3 weeks of long nights on second shift figuring it out. So I had time during the day. So they had me come in and meet the team. And it's a great team. I really enjoyed it. And
I should probably market that whole transmission of change to other shifts. So I've spent years and years in 5 and 4 shift operations, and always the biggest challenge was, we would have like Jake, we would have the experts come in, usually
oh boy,
corporate employees, occasionally like external consultants, but mostly corporate employees, they'd come in and they would always work on first shift. And I would get a little annoyed because they would like fly in on Monday and spend like an hour at the site. And then they would work 9 to 5 on the dot. And then they would fly out Friday morning. So I'm paying for a week, but we really get 3 days.
Yeah.
But it was always on first shift. And then it would be up to me to make it stick. Shifts. And I, eventually developed a skill there. And now that you bring it up, we should totally that should be part of our marketing tagline for Zoom OpX, right? It's like, hey, we can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they did have handoff meetings, but their handoff meetings were, well, machine ABC is down. Joe Blow wasn't here today, so we didn't run the parts. It wasn't about, hey, by the way, this guy came in and did these lean exercises and changed everything we did.
Right.
And then the second shift guy comes in and finds out his whole cell has been rearranged.
Right.
And
where's my machine? The whole machine is moved.
This guy, who is this guy? So I usually make jokes about the short, fat guy. I call myself the short, fat guy. So I'm sure on that second shift, they're like the short, fat, stupid guy that moves stuff. So I spent 3 or 4 weeks on that second shift, and that was right as Gibson was happening. So I had time, went into Gibson to meet the team, went away impressed, a couple of young supervisors that I thought had potential. I could really help shape them and, get them thinking differently, that kind of thing. And I thought, I'll hear from them next week or something like that. I was driving home. I live about 40 miles south of Nashville, a little town called Murfreesboro. And I was driving home, phone rings, it's the headhunter. How did it go? And I said, I think it went okay. I mean, there's other things I could have done better. And they had somebody from engineering on there that didn't like the way I said things like value stream maps. There's a certain way of doing them. The Shingujitsu way, you identify Kaizen as you go and things like that. And what makes you think we don't do that? And I just said, because you haven't been trained by Shingujitsu. I mean, that's what makes me think it. So, yeah. And I found out later that he's the director of continuous improvement for Gibson USA. So I thought, well, I bombed there and I'm sure he'll have his say in it and blah, blah, blah. But she says, well, then are you available later for a call from Sergio, my boss, because he wants to offer you a job? And I thought, holy mackerel, 9 days, start to finish. This is incredible. This to a lean guy, this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Once you're sure of the cultural fit, right? I mean, you can ask questions to test knowledge, but it's the cultural fit, right? And Sergio was good at it. He figured it out pretty quick. So yeah, I was happy. I was enthused. And literally my Kaizen event on the second shift ended 3 a.m. Monday morning, and I was in onboarding at Gibson at 8 a.m. So I was a sunshine and lollipop.
What a turnaround. Wow.
Yeah, I was not the happiest camper in the room, that's for sure. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. The Gibson
I'll tell you what,
manager is probably one of the coolest people you've ever met, who understands people well. I mean, he understands people. So and he picked up on it and he kind of helped me through.
Well, I like the part where the director, right, of CI maybe didn't see eye to eye. I love that when I'm trying to, if we're being honest these days, we have a lot less opportunity to be picky about who we're hiring. That's just like where we're at right now.
Let me just clarify, John. Did you just say the director of CI didn't see eye to eye?
Why is that funny? I don't understand. Gosh, dang it. When I have the chance, and particularly, like higher level roles, I like to find people that can communicate well, are cooperative, and are trying to make things better, who disagree, right? Now, not disagree to the extent that they have bad philosophy, or they were trained poorly, or they have a strong opinion that is bad, but disagree, genuinely. The foundation for me for sort of rapid improvement is having a bunch of different ideas, but the glue that holds it together is the mission bigger than your personal ego?
Yep.
That's the thing, right? If I can find somebody that is committed to the mission and the vision and the company ahead of their own ego, then I hope they disagree with me, because the worst case scenario is somebody in the hierarchy has to say, okay, time to stop bitching. We're going this direction.
Yeah.
Right. That's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
Most of the time, what ends up happening is you have a really fruitful conversation. You know what? I never thought about it that way before. I've never actually experienced that problem. Oh, I see why you're framing it that way. Right. And everybody grows together. So when you talk about, cultural fit, the first thing that I look for is, can this person subordinate their ego to like the team and the mission and what, and if they can, bring it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're in our world, the lean world, your ego is in results. I mean, that's the only place you're,
Thank you for saying that out loud.
Yeah.
Like the inspiration on LinkedIn and why I'm there every single day is people quabble over terms or definitions or X or Y. Like businesses care about results. And if it's not that, shut the hell up.
Yeah. Well,
is it continual improvement or continuous improvement? There's a difference.
Continuum of improvement.
Okay.
It's to be a centrifugal force, not a centripetal force.
Yeah. We talked about hot buttons, and the whole thing about technicalities about lean. It's one of my hot buttons.
Yep.
I don't care if you call it, I went to Dumaflachi and did something, as long as you did something.
Where did he go? Say that again.
Dumaflachi. That's a term from the late 70s, early 80s. We got tired of saying widgets. So people started saying, I'm making Dumaflachis. Right. And then somebody somewhere, I'm from Silicon Valley, somewhere along the line, somebody told me it was Greek for bad words. So you're like, I don't think so. But then I stopped using it just in case, I'd be in that meeting where the Greek prime minister was or something.
Right.
You.
So, I'm pretty sure there's a Sandra Bullock movie about that exact plot. I'm not.
Oh, gee. So yeah, I don't get hung up on the technicalities. I don't care if you call it, what you do. What I care about is results. Now, my job is to teach you those tools. And I'll tell you what I was told, but here's my two recent examples. Gibson, they love Japanese terms. So I just took a Gemba walk with my boss. At Tesla, they hate Japanese terms. So we had to Americanize everything. And it's just, why? It's the same thing. I'm doing the same action. And I really get hot about it. And then the people get so hung up on it. They want to have these intense discussions about, and I always use on a value stream map, the inventory symbol. Well, you didn't put the number inside. That's not right. It's like,
right.
I knew how many were there. I'm okay with it. Let's move on. So by the way, you have 18 days of inventory there. Spending any seconds at all arguing about where the number went tells me you don't know the problem. So let's go. So I just don't want to do it. I another hot button. And guys, that my interns that worked with me at Tesla know this. I call it checkbox lean. They will download something like the 25 most powerful lean tools.
Yeah.
And they'll want to use all 25 and put a check mark next to it. And they want you to tell you which situation to use what tool.
Yeah.
But I was trained by Shingi. They are kind of harsh in some ways. And one of them was that you understand the tools. And the best way to understand a tool is to use it. Go to Gemba and use it. Use it incorrectly, because that'll teach you a valuable lesson, as I did many times. And I'm sure my sensei went home at night, drank heavily, and said, I'm not sure about this guy.
Talking my language.
See, you go and you fix, and that's how you do it, right? Somebody asked me, one of my clients asked me, so I have a client that has gone on a lean journey of 25 plus years. And they've evolved, and they have really evolved well. And I was asked recently what my favorite term for lean people is. And they call their guys, and I use guys in the generic sense, that 2 of the 7 are women. It's lean champion. Their job is to champion lean within the corporation. And their charter is to go where problems are. And okay, I got it. That's great.
There you
I
go.
love it. That's it. I'm trying to convince my boss to let me do that. And apparently that doesn't fit in the corporate structure.
Right.
Yeah.
That's hard to budget for. Wait
Yeah.
a minute. Which Excel bucket does this go in? Right.
Oh, yeah.
That's where true lean happens, in an Excel spreadsheet, John.
True lean, absolutely. Yes. It all happens in an Excel spreadsheet. Let me tell you. Well, although, we joke about this precisely because we've worked, at least Jake and I have worked with so many accounting systems that don't support lean. I'm like, it's a fucking business. If the accounting system doesn't support lean, you're not lean.
Throw it out.
You can't be lean if
But
your
see,
accounting system isn't lean.
Oh my gosh, these people with control towers on spending money.
Yeah.
Like God forbid anybody spend $50 to make somebody's life better, and then you wonder why your business sucks.
Right.
So, okay. Yeah. Okay. Hot button number 3, systems that don't work. Everybody talks to me about it. And I've run across systems from SAP down to, we made it ourselves. So I have a client, 100 million revenue. They do everything in Excel.
Mm-hmm.
They have an Excel master. They have an Excel master at the company that writes everything for them, and they run it that way. They close their books in 2 days. I said, geez, why does it take 2 days? Why not 1 day? And everybody laughed because who cares? So, but if you have a system, it should work for you, right? And I mean, I did spend time implementing ERP systems, and I know about the 80% fit. You get 80%, now you start looking. But nowadays, I think you need 95 to 98% fit, with just a couple exceptions. The software needs to fit the business, not the business fit the software.
Yes, I love that. I always say the system is supposed to serve the business, not the other way around.
Yep.
And I can top that. Jake, you may or may not be familiar with a company that may or may not be a real company that I may or may not be supposed to talk about, that spent millions of dollars.
May or may not be in court Monday morning.
Right. That allegedly spent millions of dollars on an ERP. And I swear to God, every important aspect of that business was run on a Google Sheet. And I'm like, well, then just run it on the Google Sheet. Why are you spending millions of dollars on this ERP? I mean, I'm talking trailer scheduling. Like they're planning loads to drop off and pick up and haul with a Google Sheet. Well, then just use it. Forget about the ERP.
If it works, keep it and improve it. Because you can always improve. But oh boy. So
we call that philosophy downstream ERP, or DERP for short.
DERP.
I love it.
Man. Oh God. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I haven't been fired up about ERP in years because I've just ignored it.
Yeah.
So every time I go somewhere and they say, "Oh, do you want to log in?" No, don't want to log in. Yeah, nope, sure don't. So, oh yeah, I'll have people that can do it. And I mean, you talked about Lynn Engineering. I started out in supply chain there, right? On-time delivery was their issue. Typical technology company. It's material driven. Labor is such a small percentage. So it's material driven. So, well, let's go look at your material planning. They did have an ERP system and they forecasted with the typical forecast accuracy, in the high teens. And I said, why don't you guys just do, first, why don't you guys just do PFEP, do a plan for every part? You got all the data in the system, download it into Excel, have your buyers modify whatever they want to modify. We did add a supplier rating that became a multiplier for buffers kind of thing. And we did that. And oh boy, we cut inventory by about a third in a year, but we increased on-time delivery from 68 to 98%. So it's just a matter of knowing what you got, what do you need, when you need it, that kind of thing, and keeping the flow going. Now, PFEP, you got to maintain it. Oh, that's horrible. You mean somebody like a buyer might have to go in and look at their own data on a regular basis? Oh, God, how So I had to clean the
work. That sounds like work.
Yeah.
Literal reason why the big behemoth in town calls himself SAP.
Yeah. 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 So we did that, but then, the next problem is the forecasting because, long lead times and things like that. So I said, why don't you guys just do SNOP or SIOP, depending on which version you want to do. But why don't you just do that? Oh, what's that? So showed them. And 3 months later, we had SNOP in place. And we were driving PFEP and MRP from the SNOP. So sales would put their things in. Us in operations would modify it. The owner would go, oh, heck no, and change what he wanted. And then we would run with it. And life got better. So. And at the end of a year, I was done. I agreed to a year in supply chain because if you spend any time in supply chain, a year is like 7 years and dog years. It's time to go.
Yes, it is.
Yes, yeah. It's time to go back to something normal. So, and we were shutting down for Christmas, and my boss said, when you come back, we'll talk. And he promoted me to VP of Ops and said, oh, bring some more cool tools in and fix that part of it now. So. And that's what we did for the next 3.5 years. We did pretty much Toyota does the 5-year cycles.
Yep.
We pretty much did one cycle and got some of the tools in place, got them running good, all that good stuff. Had a tremendous amount of fun. I did. So, but at the end of that,
do you know where the word forecast comes from?
What body part I know it comes from, but
It's what's within 4 deviations of what actually happened.
That's the origin. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, plus or minus a brick. I got it. Yeah. I was close, and you always hear that. I was close, right? So
I was running a part of a business for T-Mobile North America, and this was a 3PL responsibility. We had 100% of their forward logistics, and I think like 33% of their reverse logistics. And I was in charge of the business to business unit. And we had just a terrible forecast, and all of the people involved in the whole supply chain, both companies were like, well, that's just forecasting. That's just retail. And I had people pulling their hair out because they were having a very difficult time winning because the forecast was terrible, right? And by terrible, I don't mean off. I mean the amount of variance, right? I don't care if it's
within
off
4
by,
deviation.
right? Like I don't care how much it's off by if it's always off by about the same amount. Instead it's down here and then up there, right? So I just kind of asked the corporate team that came down to the site. I just asked them, like, why do we care about the forecast? And like, well, that's how we determine how much labor to use, blah, blah. I was like, okay, but maybe there's another way to think about it where you don't need a forecast in order to be successful. And it started a pretty fruitful conversation. What we found out was, yes, we could do some statistical modeling. What they were stuck on was labor. And basically we were the contract structure, which was very good, by the way, for a 3PL, we got paid piece rate, right? So the amount of expenses that we had was amortized over the number of pieces. And so they were just stuck on, having as little labor as possible, which was the main controllable expense, right, to fulfill the demand. But when we got to thinking about it, we realized that was completely unnecessary, especially given the penalties in place if we missed delivery up here, right? And instead, we could staff somewhere, here where we ran a little bit of overtime when we went over, and the rest of the time, yes, we had spare labor. Big whoop. There was all kinds of things that we could do with that labor.
Yes.
All of the projects that weren't getting done, all of the continuous improvement stuff. 3 months later, everybody's workstation had a board behind it with the standard work printed out in color. So no one had to pick up anything, right? They could just look while they were working with 2 hands, right?
Yep.
And it was just a change in mindset, how you're thinking about the business.
Yep.
Well, you should know if your company's called T-Mobile that your reverse logistics is going to spike. Nobody's keeping that shit.
All right. So anyway, Bob, it's been great. It's hard to believe that we've been on here for an hour already, but it is time to wrap this up, and we'll have to plan a sequel. In the meantime, do you have any words of wisdom or advice or something cool you'd like to leave our audience with?
I always tell people that your existence is based upon changing somebody else's life for the better. So go out there and do it. Now, the best part of all this is that this is supposed to be fun. I mean, everybody, God, I spent so much time in the corporate world where everybody was just gloom and doom and, that. And once I started doing lean, I thought, I'm going to have fun. I may not fit into corporate culture, but I'm going to have fun. So I always close out everything. And in particular, the guys that work with me at Tesla will tell you, I always told them, now get out there and have some fun. So, and if it's not fun, break something and have some fun doing that. So
there you go. Well, Bob, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing with us today. For all of you out there in YouTube land, thank you for joining us. Goodbye. Makeup free, I see.